So hello everybody and welcome back once again to Kaiju Samyusong Edinburgh. This time for the last part of our course of the 4 preliminary foundations, or the 4 ways of turning the mind to Dharma. And so this final session of this course is the second session on Samsara, the defects of Samsara. But before we get to grips with that, let's set our minds in the right place by saying the lineage prayer, the prayer to the Lama, and first and foremost the prayer to the Buddha. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. Through the virtue generated by the practice of generosity and other virtues, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. Sanje chotang suji chonam la changchu padu dani chapsunji dagi jin soji pe sonamji dola pinchir sanje de parsho sanje chotang suji chonam la changchu padu dani chapsunji Dagi jin soji pe sonamji dola pinchir sanje de parsho. Glorious precious root Lama, above my head on a lotus moon seat, you care for me with great kindness. Please bestow the siddhis of body, speech, and mind. O great Vajradharati Lunaro Marpamila Dharma Lord Gampopa, knower of the 3 times, omniscient Karmapa, holders of the 4 elder and 8 younger lineages, Drikontaklung and the Salpa, glorious Drukpa, and so forth, masters of the profound path of Mahamudra, to the Dakpo instruction lineage, the peerless protectors of wanderers. Kaiju Lamas, I supplicate you, I uphold your lineage. Grant the blessings of your liberating lives. Just as revulsion is taught to be the legs of meditation, this meditator clings not to food and riches, and has severed the ties to this life. Grant your blessings for detachment from honor and gain. Just as devotion is taught to be the head of meditation, this meditator constantly prays to the Lama, who opens the vault of pith instructions. Grant your blessings for uncontrived devotion to well forth. Just as non-distraction is taught to be the body of meditation, this meditator simply remains without altering the fresh essence of whatever thought arises. Grant your blessings for parting from the concept of meditation. Just as thought is taught to be in essence Dharmakaya, for this meditator unhindered manifestation dawns. Nothing whatsoever dawning as whatever may be. Grant your blessings to realize inseparable samsara nirvana. May I never in future lives part from authentic lamas, and embracing ever the glory of Dharma. May I perfect the qualities of the levels and paths, and thus swiftly attain the state of Vajradhara. So here we are on the last preliminary, that of samsara. Sometimes it's called the defects of samsara, or the sufferings of samsara, or the viciousness of samsara, the futility of samsara. It's all about samsara. So if you remember the first part, we talked about all the different realms and the different beings, and then we talked about the realms below and the realms above the human realm, and we've left the human realm for this session because this is the one that affects us the most, since we live in this realm, and it's the one from which we can progress best, in fact, the best level from that point of view. So yeah, we need at least one full session on this. And in some way, samsara, it means like the wheel of suffering. The idea is it's kind of like a cycle, one thing leading to another, and it's a sort of endless wheel. But it doesn't have to be that way, not now that we have the path out. But if we don't take the path, then we just continue going round and round, lifetime after lifetime, and getting involved with all the different distractions and sufferings. So in some ways, that this wheel of samsara, now that this is the last session, we're kind of back to the first session almost, because we're talking about the different realms and the different sufferings, but we've been on a journey, haven't we? This is the fourth of the four foundations, preliminary foundations. So hopefully we'll have a wider, broader perspective, a deeper understanding when we look at some of the same things again, but from a different point of view, you could say. So let's begin with reciting the root text, and we'll recite the root text as always of all the four topics, because, as I've said many times before, they're all part of the same thing, the same understanding. So they follow on from one another, and each time you do your session at home, it's good to do all four root texts. So we'll say it in the English first, so we know what we're saying, and then we'll say it in the Tibetan phonetics. So part one, the difficulty of getting a fully endowed human life. The first meditation topic concerns the precious human life endowed with every freedom and asset. It is difficult to get and can be easily destroyed. So now is the time to make it meaningful. Tangpo gamcha talcho rinchendi, topka jikla tare tunyocha. Secondly, death and impermanence. The universe and everything that lives therein is impermanent, particularly the lives of beings which are like water bubbles. The time of death is uncertain, and when you die, you will become a corpse. Dharma will help you at that time, therefore practice it diligently now. Nipa no chu tamche miktakching, gosu droe se so chawotra, namchi chame shitse rurujor, tela chichi penched sompedrup. Karma, actions and their consequences. Thirdly, after your death, you will have to experience your own karma, having no degree of control over what happens. So give up harmful actions. All your time should be spent in the practice of virtue. Thinking this way, evaluate your life daily. Sumpa shitse rangwang minduar, leni dage chachi dikpapang, gewe chawe tatu darwacha, shesam ninre rangju nielatak. Fourthly, the viciousness of samsara. one is constantly tormented by the three kinds of sufferings. Therefore, samsaric places, friends, pleasures, and possessions are like a party given by an executioner who will then lead one to the place of execution. Cutting through the snares of attachment, strive for enlightenment with diligence. Shipa korwe nendro denjor so, dunyal sumchi tatad narwechir, sosa tripe shime gatanjar, shentri chene sumpe changchodro. There is also a short instruction at the very end, because this is the end of the four foundations, and it says, after these four preliminary practices, your being is now a fit vessel for further practice. So now take refuge and develop a mind intent upon enlightenment, so that whatever you do will become part of the path to liberation. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Okay. So now we'll get on with the sufferings of samsara. Now, when we're talking about the human realm, which this entire session will be about, it talks about the 8 sufferings of samsara as experienced in the human realm. Now, some of these sufferings will also be experienced in other realms, such as the animal realm and other realms that we can't even see. But we're going to look at it from the point of view of how we as human beings experience these things. So the first, in fact all of them, are seen in 5 different aspects, which we'll go through. And those 5 aspects are given in detail in the Torch of Certainty. So I brought that here because we can just read directly from that when we go into that kind of detail. So of these 8, the first 4 are birth, sickness, old age, and death. They usually come in that sort of order, don't they? And as I said, these can occur in any life form, really. But, you know, we as human beings, we're quite sort of complex, aren't we? Quite sophisticated compared to animals or insects, amoeba, maybe a few steps up from that. So everything that we experience is more complex and deeper, you could say, you know. We have sharpened senses, and we experience things more acutely, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant. I think we could say that. Of course, there are some animals higher up in the animal realm that also do experience things quite acutely, but maybe not quite as intensely or as in such detail, let's say, or in such complexity. We're complex creatures. But anyway, so the 4 of birth, sickness, old age, and death. So if we look in the Torch of Certainty, and if you've got the book, it's on page 45. So the first one is the miseries of birth. Now we might think, oh, birth, it's such a wonderful, joyous thing, you know, somebody's having a child baby and we celebrate that. Absolutely, we find great joy in that. But if we're looking at it realistically, I don't know if you've had a child, but it's painful, to say the least. It's an extremely painful process. Not only for the mother, but also for the child, which we don't tend to think of it from the child's point of view. But it's not very pleasant when you've been sort of encased in this sort of, in the belly, which, okay, it's, you know, you're being fed and all that, that's good, it's good side, but then when you're growing in there, you know, it's starting to feel very confined. Can you imagine? You'd be sort of pushing to get out, and then you want to get out, but then you've got to go down this really quite narrow passageway, which is painful for the baby and definitely painful for the mother too. So yeah, there's a lot of pain to do with birth. That's just the physical side of it. But also, anyone who is born also has the seeds of conflicting emotions. So there will be, the kleshas, the emotions they're there in their sort of seed state when we're born. And birth may entail the suffering of receiving an unfortunate birth, or a very kind of lowly status or something like that. You might be born into difficult circumstances. We don't know. So many beings are, for sure. And also because when we're born, okay, we're new babies, but from that moment onwards, every breath we take is taking us towards the end of our lives. So it just means that that the seeds of sickness and old age and death are already there. We have a lifespan. Okay, we don't know exactly how long that's going to be, but we can pretty much assume it's unlikely to be more than 100 years, and could very easily be a lot shorter than that. So everything is implicitly there, inherently there. So you could say that birth is the ground for suffering, because the conflicting emotions gradually grow, and as we're sort of stuck in this samsaric realm, we have a lack of understanding, therefore our actions are not very wise, and therefore we accumulate negative karma. Now we know now that there is the possibility to act wisely and accumulate some good karma as well. But for sure we're going to be accumulating negative karma out of ignorance, not because we want to, but out of not knowing. So that's already inherent. And so birth, you could say, is the ground for that. Because of momentariness, impermanence, we know that things are going to change. So even if we have good things happening, we know that they're not going to last. The fifth thing is that birth implies the misery of being powerless in the face of destruction. So whether that's destruction of ourselves, our body, once death comes, we're powerless to send it away. We're definitely going to have to succumb. But also, there's a powerlessness in the face of a lot of what we experience. As beings, especially, we don't have to look very far, do we? Right now we're experiencing the fruits of our collective karma in the shape of climate change. And yes, we can still do something about it, but there's a kind of feeling of powerlessness. Have we let this go too far? And sometimes things are irreversible, so we better take that on board, because we're right on the brink. So there's an angst attached to that. So all this is implicit just by being born. It might not be about climate change, but it'll be some other natural disaster or whatever. There's a lot of things we can't stop. But there's a lot we can stop, especially if we take the right path as human beings, then we don't accumulate the negative karma. So that's why we're studying all this, So now moving on to the sufferings of aging. So some people suffer a lot more than others, because there's this thing about we want to stay young, we want to always be young, and then people go to tremendous effort to stay young, don't they? Beyond just sort of looking after their bodies, which we should do, of course. But sometimes we do crazy stuff to our bodies in the effort to look young. May not be very good for our bodies, actually. But as long as we have this perfect exterior, a lot of people think like that, don't they? But anyway, in terms of what it says in the Torch of Certainty, so the miseries of aging include fading of the complexion, deterioration of form, dissipation of energy, our energy gets less eventually, impairment of the senses, maybe we don't hear or see quite as well, we need glasses sometimes, and decline of wealth. We generally tend to not be able to generate as much income perhaps when we get older. So all of those things, they're not particularly pleasant to experience. But of course, if we're very hung up on appearance, we will suffer a lot more, you know. If our complexion means so much to us that we will try any kind of cream and lotion and anything to not only that, but then we might have Botox and fillers to plump us up or something, you know. So we go to incredible lengths and expense to try and preserve what looks supposed to look like a youthful complexion, but ends up looking quite artificial sometimes, so we're a bit strange. And the same with our body, you know, people have bits taken off one place and to make that thinner and then put somewhere else to make that fatter or bigger. And so, I think, you know, the more hung up we get on that, the more suffering it is. The only people that don't suffer from that are the people making money out of anyone sort of grasping enough to pay lots of money in order to fight a losing battle, really, isn't it? Whereas if there's some acceptance about growing old gracefully and maybe concentrating on what's more important, which is our mind, you know, because that actually can improve with age. Okay, we may not be quite as sharp in our faculties, or maybe we need glasses or a hearing aid or something like that. But if we develop our minds and our understanding, that can get much broader. We know more than we did when we were younger. So we should celebrate what's good about age. And then that kind of alleviates some of the suffering that our bodies aren't quite as youthful looking as they used to be. So anyway, so the body, so the miseries of the dissipation of energy, impairment of senses, and the decline of wealth, which, as long as we're not overly materialistic, as long as we've, you know, then we don't suffer so much as long as we've got a roof over our head and food and, you know, basic necessities, and live simply. If we live simply when we have got money, then it's likely to look after us in our old age too. And I think simplicity is the key to a lot less suffering. Okay, then moving on to the third one, which is the 5 sufferings or miseries of illness. So we know that at some point in our lives we're going to get ill. You know, even as children, we get childhood illnesses, chickenpox, measles, that kind of thing. But also we could get more serious illnesses, and also you know, when we're learning how to walk and run and everything, we fall over, we injure ourselves. Usually it may be just a scraped knee or something, but sometimes you can really, really hurt yourself. I mean, when I was little, I knew the word concussion from a very early age. Not that I actually experienced it, but I was forever falling over and banging my head. And so my mother would take me to hospital in case I got concussion, whatever that was. It might explain certain things later in my life, but I don't think I actually had concussion. Anyway, but we do get scars and battle wounds, don't we? Battle scars and on our knees and elbows and stuff. And it's not pleasant at the time, for sure. And then there's when we do get ill, sometimes, you know, as adults, especially if we get quite ill, we maybe don't know what we have. You know, like for example, this time during this pandemic, you know, some people, they just maybe get a sore throat, and they get so anxious because it could be COVID, you know, coronavirus or something serious. But maybe it's just a summer cold or something, you know, or a mild sore throat. But the anxiety about it makes it worse, you know, makes it feel worse. So we get an increase of frustration and anxiety. And then there's the body's natural changes. So as our bodies get older, you know, there's a few things might start going wrong. It's a bit like with a car, you know, you have to get your MOT done from time to time. Well, of course, we're very lucky to have modern medicine. Well, some of us do, not everybody does, of course. But that can help alleviate many conditions. Nevertheless, there's still suffering attached Nobody likes going to hospital. Nobody probably really much likes going even to the doctors, getting prodded and poked and stuff. We'd rather not, wouldn't we? But, generally speaking, in our life, we'll experience that at some time or another. And then the deterioration of form. So, no matter, we can delay it somewhat, and we can look after our bodies, which is good to do, and keep ourselves healthy. But eventually, everything starts to go south a bit. We get a bit saggy and maybe put on too much weight or something like that, or just lose strength basically as well, isn't it? So we notice this, and if we're too hung up on it, then we suffer more. Then, of course, when we're ill, then or experience some of the sort of unpleasantness about old age is like we're not always able to enjoy what we used to enjoy, or not to the same extent. The pleasures that we used to enjoy, we can't so much enjoy them anymore. Of course, if we're developing our minds, we can enjoy other things. But in terms of the body, maybe we can't run as fast as we used to be able to, or our strength isn't quite as much. We can't lift things. We might have to ask for help for more things than we'd like to, So that's not very pleasant, not to have that kind of independence as much as before. And even sometimes the inability to enjoy certain foods that we used to. Perhaps our digestion can't take it anymore, so we have to have a more bland diet, maybe. There's all different things that we found pleasant in our youth that we may not be able to find pleasure in anymore. And then the fourth one is the need to rely on what is unpleasant to us. So medicine, for example, although it does us good, it's not necessarily pleasant to take, is it? Sometimes it tastes really horrid. Or we might have to have crutches, or some way of helping us get around, walking sticks or even wheelchairs, So these things in themselves are not unpleasant, they're helpful. But we think we see them as unpleasant because we'd rather not have to use them. We'd rather have the independence of not having to use a wheelchair. So we look at them as being unpleasant in that way. But of course, we're grateful for them if we need them. But yes, we'd rather be able to manage without them, wouldn't we? And then the fifth one is, as we get older and older, then we know that we're coming towards the end of our life, and if we have fear of death, then that can be again a cause for great anxiety. We fear the approach of death. If we get into our 70s or 80s, 90s even, then of course we're getting closer to our death. I mean, we could be closer to our death when we're 20, because we don't know when we're going to die. But if we do manage to live to a ripe old age, we know that death can't be that far away, and that can cause us, worry and concern at least, and especially if we've lived quite a negative sort of life, then we'll have a lot of fear around that. If we've lived a good life, a positive life, then we won't fear death so much. And if we practice the Dharma, we can see it in an entirely different light. We can see it as an opportunity. So how we suffer in samsara depends on how we're living in samsara, what we're doing, our actions. But, to some degree or another, there'll be some kind of suffering to do with aging and illness. And then the 5 miseries of death. So when death it does eventually catch us, then the 5 miseries of death include the separation from wealth. So whatever, we could be as billionaires, or we could be paupers, but whatever we've got, we can't take it with us. So And if we're billionaires and we've spent all our lives accumulating vast amounts of money and possessions and everything like that, then we have to leave it. We have to go with nothing. So I think in that way it could be that for wealthy people death is really hard because they have to leave all this stuff behind. Whereas for a pauper they didn't have much to begin with, so maybe not quite so hard in that way. Then also separation from influence. So if, for example, if we've had a lot of power in our life and a lot of influence over many people, and then suddenly we've got nothing like that. It's like everything's going, not just the wealth, but also the power, the influence that we had over others. It's as if it never was. And I can imagine if you put a great store on that, if you attach a lot of importance to that, then that would really be heart-wrenching, I would imagine. Then, the separation from friends and loved ones. Now, I think we can all relate to that, So, if we have a good death, and I think we think of a good death as, being maybe at home surrounded by our family and friends, and they're crying maybe, and they don't want us to go, and we don't want to go, and maybe it's a bit like that. But yeah, we don't want to leave them, and they don't want us to go, or maybe they do. I guess it depends on circumstances. But pretty much most people don't want to die, and they don't want to leave their loved ones. They're still attached. So, if we prepared well, then although we still very much love our loved ones, we're not so attached. It's not the love that's the problem, it's the attachment. So yeah, that's definitely true. Then also we have to leave our body, our own body. We have to leave that. We don't take our body with us. This is what we're most attached to, isn't it? Especially if we've been, really attached to it and kind of, always doing what we were talking about before and trying to make it stay young and spending lots of money on it and, all of this. We're so attached to it. It's been our life's work to keep it looking youthful or dressed in the best clothes and all of this kind of thing. But even without that, even just if we lived even a fairly simple life, we're very familiar with our bodies. We do try to look after them, at least to keep them in reasonable working order. So to leave that, it's, imagine, I think it's a bit like as if you had a treasured car, a vintage car that you've had all your life and you've really looked after and it's looking in good condition, but eventually the engine fails and it's irreparable and you have to leave it. Well, of course, it's even worse than that because this is your flesh and blood. But in a way, it is a little bit like that because your body, if we could look at it as just like a car in the sense that it's a possession for a while, but it's only on rental, if you like, or we hire it for a lifetime, and then in the knowledge that we know that we have to leave it after up to 100 years, say. If we have this at the back of our mind that we don't own it exactly, that it's just something that we've had the good fortune to be able to occupy for however many years, and then at the end of our hire time, it's time to vacate. So, of course, how much suffering we have on death it depends on how we look at it. But anyway, definitely we have to leave this body that we think of as our body. And then the fifth point is anguish, violent anguish. Again, this depends on how we've lived our lives. But if we're totally unprepared, if the word Dharma or whatever the English equivalent would be, the way of the truth, let's say, if we haven't been living according to that, then death takes us by surprise, even if we've had a long illness leading up to it. When death actually finally comes, it kind of is not wanted. It takes us by surprise and we're not prepared. If we're not prepared, then it can be extremely full of anguish and fear. You know? If we are prepared, different story. But we're talking about samsara here, and samsara's sufferings. So those are the 4 first of the 8 sufferings, which you could say to some degree or another all beings experience. But now let's move on to the 4 sufferings that we experience in the human realm that are not experienced in other realms, or certainly not as in the way that we would experience them. So the first of those is the suffering of not getting what we want. Now, the cause for us being born in the human realm and in samsara is desire. So we are creatures of desire. There's no 2 ways about it. From being little kids, Mum, I want this, Mum, I want that, Dad, can I have that? Can we go there? Can we do this? It's just want, isn't it? We have to own it. That's how we are. From being little children to being grown-ups. We're wanting this all the time. Wanting. But we don't always get what we want. You remember the Rolling Stones? You can't always get what you want. And of course that's very true. You can't always get what you want. Whether it's food that we want, something relatively simple, food. There's no saying we will get any food. And even if we do get food, will we get the food that we want? We can be extremely picky. Oh, well, I did ask for, a cheese sandwich, but I don't like this cheese. What kind of... And this bread is not very nice either, And what, is this butter or is it some sort of... What is it? Oh, and it's got no crust on. We can be so picky. And, when we're overly picky, it's a cause of suffering because it increases the chance of us not getting what we want. If we're more easy with things, then, we're glad to have some food, aren't we? If you compare yourself to someone who's starving, if you were starving, you wouldn't turn your nose up at a certain kind of cheese in the bread or something, would you? You'd be so glad of it. But it's in the nature of desire that whatever we have, we want more or we want better. We want different. And with modern day life, the way advertising is, we call this the consumer society. We're not even people, we're consumers. To those people that are trying to sell us things, they don't see us as people, they see us as consumers. Or maybe we're the ones selling stuff, and we see others as consumers, Maybe we've done both in our lifetime. I certainly have. I used to work in advertising for only a short while. I got out of it. But for a while I was selling stuff to people, so I couldn't do it anymore. And but this is how we learn also, of course, through our mistakes and seeing that what's not so good to do. Anyway, we're always wanting, and so it could be just something we think of as relatively simple, like food, but we can see how complicated that can get. We might not be happy unless we're eating in a 5-star Michelin, or did it go to 5-star, 3-star at least anyway, Michelin hostelry or whatever, Some people, that's what they're accustomed to. And you take them to an ordinary place and they don't like it. Or we could be, very attached to fame. We're going after fame. This is also quite, I guess it's always been around in one way or another, but these days it seems very prevalent, very predominant, so-called celebrities who are what they celebrated for, just 15 minutes of fame, as Andy Warhol said, isn't it? It's like, your moment in the spotlight. I don't know, it's... To me, it's always seemed very, well, it always had a big downside, is when you have fame, it's a tremendous loss of freedom, and for me that sort of really puts you off it, doesn't it? You can't get, I mean, some people like to be recognized, but only on their own terms, and then if they're recognized when they don't want to be recognized, then it's not so good, so better not get recognized in the first place, apart from maybe by your friends. Anyway, but some people really go all out for fame. They put so much effort into being famous. Or of course you could just get famous because you're good at something, and it's not that you want to be famous, but it kind of comes with the territory. Like you might be a really good actress or a good sports person or whatever, and then the fame comes as a sort of side dish. But still, it's if you have the right view, then maybe it doesn't cause so much suffering. But sometimes it can do. Fortune, again, nobody wants to be impoverished, but some people, really want to make a lot of money, and of course, as with all desires, it's never enough, it's like, you get, you maybe start off, would it be great if I had a bicycle, I could get a bicycle, and then maybe it's not fast enough, or maybe I need a motorbike, and then you need a car, and so then you get a car, and you're working all the time for this, and maybe neglecting other things because you want this car, and then you get the car, and oh great, I've got the car, but then actually that car's way better than the one I've got, so you work a bit harder, and then you get the new model of whatever, and there's just no end to it, because then you need the yacht or the jet, it just goes on and on and on. So we're trapped in this wanting all the time. And it's not the car that's bad or the bicycle that's bad necessarily, but the wanting, the attachment, the craving. Craving is what makes you suffer. If through maybe you're a doctor doing something really good and you get very well rewarded, and then you can get a nice car, and you get a nice car, but if you're not so attached to it, then of course you don't have so much suffering when you lose it, if and when you lose it. It probably won't be very pleasant, but it's not the end of the world. So that depends on our attitude to things. But, there's definitely going to be some suffering attached with whatever we don't get. Whether not getting what we want, whether we don't get food, whether we don't get fame, we're just craving it, wanting it. Despite all our efforts, we don't get it, And of course, by sort of going all out to get these things, we might do negative stuff. People do, don't they? They might steal it, or embezzle to get what they want, or tell lies to get what they want, cheat to get it. And so then we're always attracting this negative karma. Well, we're doing negative karma, we're doing negative actions, and then we might get what we wanted, but then there'll be some negative results attached to that, whether they're immediate or later in life or in the next life. We looked at karma, so it's all part of the same thing. So, yeah, and whatever we do get, we're never satisfied for very long, because then we want the next thing and then more and more, whatever. So it's this constant wanting. It's not a pleasant situation to be in, never satisfied. Then the sixth suffering is the suffering of not retaining what we have. So maybe we do get some of what we want, and we're very attached to it. We have this wonderful house, or this beautiful car, or whatever. Or a perfect husband or wife. It doesn't have to be a thing, it can be a person, can't it? We wanted that person and we've got that person. And then we live in fear of losing that person. I didn't like the way so-and-so was looking at him or her, and then we get eaten up with jealousy, which is suffering. So not retaining what we have. Or it can be our wealth, and maybe we did accumulate a lot of money and property and possessions, but then the market crashed or something happened, and then we've lost it. And it's a lot worse when you've had it and you lose it than if you never had it, because now what you've worked for is gone, and it's heart-wrenching, isn't it? And so then we have to protect our property. We have to, it makes our life very complicated, because finally we've got this beautiful house, but then robbers might come and steal from us, so we have to get security, and maybe we live in a gated enclave or something, we're scared that we're going to get attacked by robbers, or people, or mugged in the street to take our fancy watch or something, So everything comes with a price, and not just the price you pay in the shop, but the price you pay for owning it, and the kind of neurosis it creates. We become neurotic about them, about keeping what we have. And then we suffer so much when somebody does take it, or the floods come, or the wildfires come, which this is what's going on now, isn't it? And of course, it's bad for anybody, even a modest little house. When you're homeless, you're homeless. But imagine you worked all your life at this palace, and that's gone, So, the suffering is greater as well. And and also in relationships with partners, that can be very, very traumatic for people, can't it? When you put all your energy, all your eggs into this particular basket of one person, you're so attached to them, and then they have a wandering eye, or somebody, they go off with somebody else. That's not so good. Of course, eventually, they're going to die, or we'll die if they die first, and, it's a natural process, but it's still, tugs your heart. You feel distraught. Some people die straight away afterwards out of a broken heart, because they're so attached. So of course, again, I can't stress more that the love is not what is the problem here. It's the attachment. So we exhaust ourselves trying to keep what we've acquired, and then we have so much suffering when we lose it. And of course, eventually, we definitely will lose it when we die, because we have to separate from it. And that's the seventh thing, actually. The seventh one is the sufferings of separation from what we hold dear. So we've kind of segued into that now. So sooner or later we're going to be separated from our loved ones. So maybe they don't go off with somebody else, or they don't go and live in another country, but they may go and live in another country, or by some of life's circumstances. I mean, most people these days, I think it's quite rare for a whole family an extended family, certainly to live together. Usually when the children grow up, they go off and live somewhere else. It may be just around the corner, it might be in another town, it might be in another continent. In many families they're kind of scattered, and they only see each other rarely. And then when there's a pandemic, you don't see each other at all, even if it's only around the corner. So it's separation from what we hold dear. So sooner or later, we're separated from our loved ones, whether by circumstance or by death. And we may also lose our career that we've fought, struggled to get. This wonderful career that's given us prestige and wealth and whatever else has come by. And eventually we have to let that go, or we might get the sack. We might have done something really bad, or we might have not done something bad, but have been slandered. We might lose our reputation. Not always just tangible things, but things like our power, our influence, our reputation. It might have been justified. Maybe we did something really bad, and therefore we've lost our good reputation. Or it could be somebody slandering us that wants to do us wrong, And so it's not justified, but we still lose our reputation and can lose our livelihood because of that. I'm sure you've read of many people that that's happened to. So these are quite sort of more subtle types of suffering that are really very much to do with the human realm, aren't they? And we have some bad publicity or something, you know, sort of sophisticated sufferings like that, you know. Or these days with the what I call the antisocial media, it is so antisocial a lot of the time, of people saying really horrible things about each other. Some might be true, most of them are probably not. There's just this negativity proliferating around the world, you know, not just sort of locally, but globally it can be. And people can be so distraught because of that they end up killing themselves, you know. They end up taking their own lives because of so much suffering, because of losing, you know, their reputation, and because of what some idiots are saying or whatever, but still it hurts, you know, because we're attached to our reputation. We don't want to be, of course we don't want to be thought ill of. And that's, now we're talking about the eighth one, which is the sufferings of encountering the undesirable, what we don't want, we definitely do not want. So we might meet with these unwanted situations. I mean, so we can have, for example, a serious illness. You know, not something usual as a part of the general aging process, but something more unusual, well, like coronavirus, or I had malaria one time, and luckily, it's the kind that doesn't recur, but you don't know that when you've got it. You're quite close to death, and it wasn't pleasant. Although, I have to say, it was a voyage of discovery. Yeah, so there was a good side attached to it. But anyway, for sure, it wasn't pleasant to experience. And, or, you know, if we have dangerous enemies, people that are have ill will towards us, whether it's online and it's verbal, or it could be, you know, in actual physically, you know, somebody coming to harm us or kill us, you know. We could be assaulted by someone who hates us. We could be killed randomly. This happened was it yesterday? Somebody went with a gun, went mad and killed random people. It's thankfully not that common, but it definitely happens. So yeah, that could happen, and or you know, we could have lawsuits against us. It's another really unpleasant thing that we might have to suffer from. We might end up in the courts. It might be some trivial thing, or it might be a really, really really serious thing. And then we have to, you know, stay in a police cell, and we have lawyers and things like that, and you know, we might get sent to prison. We might get sent to prison for something we didn't do, or something that we did do. Either way, we're not going to enjoy being in prison, I don't think. So there's all of these, you know, more complex types of suffering that can arise to us as human beings. So those are the 8 main categories. Now, they're broad categories. And I've mentioned a few of them, of the sort of different types, but you know, there's many. They divide into many more subgroups than that, and I'm sure you don't have to, you know, think too much before you come up with some more. But now we're going to move on to the sufferings that are common to all beings in samsara. So we'll look at these 3 types of suffering that are common to all samsaric beings, all the beings that live in the different realms of samsara. So the first of those is called the sufferings of suffering itself. And what it means by that is the suffering or the pain or the misery we experience from different types of suffering, and very often piling up one after another, you know. I mean, there's so many things we could think of, but I think, you know, when we say something like, oh, it never rains but it pours, you know, it's like, oh, first one thing bad happens that we don't like, and then the next thing and the next thing, and it seems like, can we stand any more of it? You know, it very often it comes in groups of suffering, isn't it? We feel like we've just had too much, we can't stand it anymore. And very often one form of suffering leads to another, you know. So we might, for example, we might be robbed. You know, we might have something and somebody takes it from us, and then they might attack us to get that thing. So then they attack us, and then they rob us, and then we are in hospital, and then we get really sick, or we even die. So it's like one suffering after another. That's just a very kind of obvious example, but there are many permutations, and I'm sure we've all experienced sort of groups of suffering that happen one after another and overwhelm us. Then there's the second one, is the suffering of change. So even if we find something, some pleasure, some pleasurable experience happens to us, or we find some form of pleasure or happiness, but it is only transitory. And if we've never really come to terms with impermanence, then that really affects us. Oh, I had this, and then it's gone, you know, and then it, you know, it's so unexpected that we would lose it if we've never given this much any thought before, if we've never thought about death and impermanence, and then we lose somebody or something. We suffer a lot more with it because it's not so expected. Also, some things that we find pleasurable, in fact, quite a lot of things that we find pleasurable can actually be harmful to us. So although they may start out with giving us pleasure, in the end they cause us suffering. I mean, food can be pleasurable, for sure. But if we have too much of it, or the wrong type of it, or we get addicted to it, then it becomes a big problem, and then we have suffering. We might get obese, or we might be poisoned by it. I mean, many different things like that. Or I mean, very obvious ones are things like smoking and drinking. You know, so I mean, it's socially acceptable to drink and even get drunk. But actually, we're poisoning ourselves, aren't we? So that's why the people who have pubs, it's licensed to sell intoxicants. I mean, that comes from the root toxic. It means poison. So alcohol is actually, you know, poisoning. So maybe a bit of it is not too bad, you know, but then it's hard to stop because it's addictive. So you get more and more, and then you have a big problem. And not only you have the problem, but those around you have the problem as well. If you know anybody that's addicted to alcohol, you'll see, you know, or addicted to any pleasure. That gambling is a big one, you know, so it might be fun to have a flutter on the horses once a year, no big deal. But then when you get addicted to it and you use all your money up and your family's money, then you're causing tremendous suffering by something that began as a so-called pleasure. And of course smoking is very obvious. So all these things that we actually can find pleasurable, but end up causing great suffering. And of course, you know, even harmless pleasures, something that is pleasurable and is not harmful, but it's impermanent, because everything is bound to change. So if we're too attached to it in that way, and we think it's going to last forever, and then when it doesn't, then we have this suffering. Or a relationship, you know, that we want it to last forever, but it doesn't, or the person dies or goes away or whatever. So all of these worldly pleasures contain the seed of suffering within them, even the ones that aren't intrinsically harmful in themselves, you know, but they have the seed of impermanence they're going to finish, they're going to end. That's why, at the beginning we said that samsara is like a party before our execution. So yeah, we have some pleasures, we have some enjoyment, but eventually they come to an end. And if we're too attached to it, it feels like the execution. It's a very kind of strong phrase, but I think it's quite good in a way to really remind us, that there's nothing wrong with enjoying our pleasure and whatever comes to us, that's pleasurable, but don't expect it to last, Be realistic about it. So that's the second one, the suffering of change. And the third one is the sufferings of all conditioned existence. And both the previous types of suffering that we just mentioned are based on this one. Because this one is based on the deluded view, the delusion that we have a self, and that of the five skandhas. The skandhas are the five factors, or what's the word? We'll stick with factors. The five factors present in any kind of relative existence, which we all have a relative existence. So that's form, whatever form we have, feeling, the feeling that we have, the senses, the kind of the motivation, our oomph, what motivates us, and our consciousness. So all forms have that in either very simple forms or very complex forms. And of course, as human beings, we have this in very complex forms. But and there's endless permutations. But that we need those five factors to be present in any kind of relative existence. This is not easy to get your head around. Because we don't see the world in that way, do we? We're not conscious of relative truth and absolute truth, how things appear to us, but how they really are. We just think that's how it is. We think we know, but we don't. We have a deluded view because we think of it a self. And this is very hard to unravel. It's very hard to unpack this idea of a self. I, me, mine, other. It isn't actually like that. But it's difficult to because, most other people also think like that. This is a deluded view. Realized beings, enlightened beings, don't think like that. They've moved beyond that. The Buddha did not think like that anymore because he saw through it. Not only the Buddha, but the enlightened masters, the realized beings, what we're working towards. Because they perceive the all-pervading suffering of conditioned existence. They could see it, how it is, warts and all. But most people don't. We go for the Hollywood version. We go for the glamour, glamour in the old sense of the word of being kind of bedazzled by it. We're taken in by it. And we're so bound up in samsara that even when we think we're doing quite well, because of course it's not all, some things are pleasant, and we might be in a period of our life when we're really enjoying stuff and everything seems to be going well, we've got the house we want, got this, that and the other, but we don't see that it's not going to last. We don't see that it will end in suffering. And that's why it's likened to the party before being led to the execution. So we don't even know we're suffering or we're about to be suffering. All the Buddha's teachings that he gave, whichever of the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma, when he was teaching his Sangha, monks and nuns, life is suffering. Samsara is suffering. So we have to come to terms with that in order to get out of it. It doesn't mean to say we have to be miserable. In fact, we become more happy because we're actually seeing things as they are, and we're not being deluded by things, you know. So I'm still well in samsara, believe me, but I'm a much happier person than I was before I entered the Dharma, for sure. And, you know, probably got a long way to go, but still, you know, you start to have little glimpses of how it actually is, as opposed to how it might appear to be, or how you've been told it is by, you know, the other deluded people. And believe me, there's a lot of those. I don't need to tell you that. Anyway, so, you know, don't think you should be miserable about it, because, as I said at the very beginning, in order to get out of this prison of samsara, we have to look into it. We have to understand it in order to get out of it. Otherwise, we're going to be its victim. We're going to be deluded. We're going to continue to be deluded in the dark. So we have to look into it for the light to dawn. It's not about going to a different place. It's more like switching the light on. Nothing has changed, but the way we see things has changed. The way we understand. So, I think, you know, the way to do this, if we like summarize this whole journey, you could say, we need to root out our attachment. The attachment's the big problem here. So enjoy your life, enjoy whatever pleasures come your way, but get rid of the attachment. Root it out, because that's where the suffering is. And instead, reflect on the great blessings that you've had to encounter the Dharma. This is rare. As we know when we looked into precious human life, this is rare to encounter the Dharma and to find others that, you know, that can help along the way and support each other. This is rare, and we should not just treasure it, but work with it. Really, you know, count our blessings, because we're on the road. If we follow this path, we're on the road to great freedom, great liberation from the clutches of samsara. You know, we can jump off the hamster wheel of going round and round, same old suffering, same old this, that and the other, going round and round and round, you know. So when the light dawns, when we have this understanding and we see how it really is, it's like we're on the outside of that. You know, we're in space, we're in the air, we're free. And every step we take along the way is that little bit more freedom, a little bit more. That's what liberation is. Liberated from a deluded view. You might still be on planet Earth, you might still be in the same job, you might still, everything outwardly could be the same. But inwardly, how you see it, that's what changes. And with that great understanding, of course, in your next lifetime, you have a bit more say in the matter. You're not just on the winds of karma. So it maybe take many lifetimes, but if you're on the right path, every lifetime will take you further. So the best thing to do is to study the 4 foundations, the 4 preliminaries, meditate again and again on these preliminary foundations, because although they're preliminaries and they're foundations, they are so important. Without them, there are no further teachings. So it could not be more important. Without the foundations, there's no house. In fact, Drikungpa, great Tibetan master Drikungpa, he said that the 4 preliminary foundations, or the 4 ways of turning the mind to Dharma, are more profound than even the highest Mahamudra. Mahamudra is the highest pinnacle of teachings. Because without assimilating them, there is no possibility of achieving our Buddha nature. So, you know, we have so much blessing and good fortune to have met it. Now it's up to us whether we use it. So I really hope that you will. I think we'll finish with time's getting on. I think it had to be a short meditation. I think what we'll do is we'll just sit and relax in awareness. So just straighten up your posture. Just feel like you're a tree growing upwards, so you're taking the weight off the base of your spine, and the top of your head's reaching up to the light, straightening out the vertebra. And relax into a good posture. Tuck the chin in a little bit so the neck's in alignment. Eyes resting, open, but focused inwardly on your mind. You're resting in your inner awareness, inner spacious, limitless, true nature. Just let your breathing be natural, fully breathing using your lungs and diaphragm and your belly. So relaxing your belly, allowing it to fill, expand with each in-breath, and deflate, of course, as you breathe out, letting go of any tension on the out-breath. So we're just resting. Rest the mind on the breath. Let the mind ride the breath naturally, letting them settle. Gently aware of the breathing. The whole body relaxed. The mind resting, riding the breath. And as the mind settles, just allow it to clear whatever thoughts and images or sounds, anything that arises, just allow it to come and go without grasping it. Just accept whatever's happening. Let it come and go without engaging, and bringing your mind home to rest. Resting fully alert, fully aware, but without grasping whatever occurs, be it outward or inward. Just resting in the spacious awareness, your true Buddha nature of mind. And we'll finish our meditation with these words by Patrul Rinpoche, addressing his guru or the Buddha. I see that samsara is suffering, but crave it still. I fear the abyss of the lower realms, but continue to do wrong. Bless me and those who have gone astray like me, that we may sincerely renounce the things of this life. Okay, so when you're practicing at home, please give yourself plenty of time to meditate on each topic. We didn't do it there because we're running out of time, but we kind of had an overview and we looked at everything all in one go. But of course, when you're practicing at home, you break it down. And these are the topics. I'll just recap the ones to do. So the first is to do with the 8 sufferings of human existence. So week 1, the first week, you spend with doing birth, old age, sickness and death. So those 4 things in the first week. And then week 2, not finding what we seek or what we want. Not finding what we want or seek. Not retaining what we have. Separation from what is dear. And encountering the undesirable, what we don't want. All of those things, those can be in week 2, or you can spend longer if it's quite a lot. So if you want to make that into 2 weeks, that's absolutely fine. It's quite a big category, so maybe good to split it into 2 weeks. And then the week 3 is the 3 sufferings common to all samsaric beings that we just spoke about. So all of those 3 in week 3 or 4. It's maybe 4 might be better. So you have lots to study and meditate on and apply in your own life. Of course, it's just not only about your session at home, but when you're out and about, see how things are, see how things work, see it at play. So there'll be other forthcoming courses, I hope, in our email, our newsletter. So if you're not signed up to it, maybe get signed up to it. You can just go on our website. And then things will come onto our homepage, and you'll be able to see what else. Because this is the end of this particular course now, so we'll see what's happening. To be sure, I'm not entirely sure myself right now in what order I'm going to do things. But even though Samyuzong Edinburgh has started to do things in real life, as it were, hopefully we'll maybe gradually try to do a bit more of that. But I think, because I know a lot of people seem to be benefiting from the online courses who don't live in nearby or even in all different parts of the world. So I'd like to keep that what did I call it? The online Dharma, online lifeline. I think maybe I don't want to suddenly pull it away if maybe that's all some people have. Hopefully not, but I think it might be useful to carry on with it. As long as you're attending in your own way, then we'll try and do something. In the meantime, we've got lots to practice. And that's just my courses, but there's many other things you'll find online, and by wonderful teachers. His Holiness Karmapa is going to start a course. Sister Rinpoche is presently doing, coming towards the end of a course, but all of these things then go to YouTube, so it's good to do them in the right order, and live if you can do them live, but as long as you do them in the right order, then that's the main thing. So now that we've completed this course, in a way, as I said before, we're kind of back to the beginning. But if you go back to the beginning, and why not? Why not go through it all again? Because you'll find that your understanding has really already come on a lot. So I would definitely recommend doing it. I can't tell you the amount of times I've done the 4 preliminary foundations, and every time I do it or teach it, I still find new things. So, because you change, everything changes, your awareness gets more and understanding. So now we've kind of come full circle. But you've still got the last part of Samsara to do, and then if you wish, you can go back to the beginning and see how much progress you're making, which is quite sort of gives you some impetus, But the main thing is to be inspired by this samsara, to renounce what's harmful, what's not useful for you, to renounce it. If once you know that something's not good for you, really it's very stupid to carry on with it, isn't it? Of course we do sometimes do that, but the more you look into it, the more you see what's harmful, then you can be inspired to let it go. Let go of what's holding you back, so that you can become who you truly are, which is Buddha. It might take a while, but that's who you truly are. So we shouldn't lose sight of that. And even if you never receive any other teachings, it is said by truly internalizing and practicing these foundations, all the positive qualities will arise. All your which you have inherent in you. So they will all blossom. So that's it for now. I hope I will be seeing you again, and vice versa. But we'll just dedicate the merit of all our practice, not just today's, but the whole course. We'll dedicate it for the goodness and the well-being of all sentient beings. I'll say it in English first, and then in the Tibetan phonetics. Through the wholesomeness of this practice, may all the mental defilements be overcome, and may all beings be liberated from the ocean of samsara, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. O sanam de tamche zikpani, topne nye pe danam pamchene, jiganachi baladrukpai, sipe sole doa doa sho. So, until we meet again, happy study, happy meditation, happy life.